Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. We might have a few more people joining us, but first of all, I want to start out by introducing myself. My name is Jeff Mock. I am the Executive Director of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. We're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to uh, uh, connecting state legislators across the country who are passionate about environmental issues. And I wanted to start out by mentioning what we're about. What's happening today. Today, state legislators from 9 states across the United States are announcing a coordinated effort to hold plastic packaging producers responsible through policies that promote extended producer responsibility, or EPR. Each state on the call today is introducing legislation to address plastic pollution and waste created from other post-consumer products. Some states on this call are introducing EPR for packaging bills to establish programs in their states, while others are introducing other forms of plastic pollution legislation with the goal of working towards the extended producer responsibility. Represented on the call today, we have California, Colorado, Hawaii, Maryland, New Hampshire, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. And we do want to mention that New York is also participating in this network and introducing EPR legislation, but we're unable to make this particular time. Those sponsors are of the New York bill are State Senator Todd Kaminsky and State Assembly Member Steve Engelbright. Other states are also working on EPR that have not joined this network just yet. Also want to mention that on the call today, we have Melissa Netto, who is an NCEL Circular Economy Senior Advisor and also a former state representative from Maine. And she will be providing an overview and background of EPR. Note that we will be taking questions after the remarks. So everyone, please, one more time, I'll mention if you can change your Zoom name to include your media outlet, or if you're a legislator to include your state, so that we can have that front and center. Before diving into the policy, I want to mention a little bit more about NCEL. We are a nonprofit that was created by and for state legislators. We're a network of over 1,000 environmentally committed state legislators from all 50 states and both parties. NCEL does not lobby for or against legislation. Rather, we provide venues and opportunities for lawmakers to share ideas and collaborate on environmental issues. For the past few years, we've been organizing and convening legislators who are working to address the growing plastic pollution crisis. Last year alone, 35 states introduced legislation related to tackling the plastic pollution crisis. States are now turning toward a more holistic approach and looking to address the problem further up at its source. The legislators on this call have been meeting monthly to learn more about EPR policy options and lessons learned and issues to consider as they're advancing them. Now these states are taking action by introducing legislation to move their states toward EPR programs, and by acting together, they are sending a strong message and are ensuring effective EPR policy models across the country with a goal of moving their states toward a circular economy and zero waste. One of NCEL's primary focuses is ensuring a healthy, just, and equitable environment for all. By implementing EPR policies together with source reduction and recycled content policies, states can address the inequities caused by plastic pollution. 3 major goals and outcomes of EPR strong EPR policies can include reducing waste incineration, reducing hazardous substances in packaging, and increasing recycling. Incinerators are often located in and having disproportionate impacts on low income and minority populations. By reducing and phasing out incineration of harmful plastics, these communities will have cleaner air to breathe and reduce toxins in their environment. Packaging products like those used for food and beverage packaging often contain hazardous substances that are harmful to human health. Including recycled content provisions in EPR packaging policies can force manufacturers to eliminate those harmful substances in packaging products, so these substances aren't recycled back into products. And increased recycling will divert additional waste and plastics from landfills and ocean dumping. Even in landfills, plastic pollution takes hundreds of years to break down and can create microplastics. During this process, plastics can leach into toxics into the earth and make its way into our waterways. Passing strong and extend producer responsibility legislation will put the burden of dealing with this waste and the environmental harms it creates back on producers and rather on our communities. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Melissa Netto, who will be providing an overview of EPR.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Hello and good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm Melissa Netto, and with NCEL, I've been supporting state legislators who are working in my favorite policy area, which is EPR for packaging. As Jeff noted, I am a former state legislator, so I understand how much work goes into passing strong legislation, especially ones with goals of reworking the way our state and our country manage our end-of-life packaging. In my current work also with national toxic reduction clearinghouses, it's also become clear that we not only need to reduce our volume of waste packaging, but also the toxic chemicals that are in the packaging. Millions of tons of post-consumer packaging, which is plastics, enter our municipal solid waste management systems each year, with some recycled, but most incinerated or buried in landfills. EPR, as Jeff mentioned, is a policy approach for packaging. It's already being utilized in 47 other jurisdictions, including the entire EU and 5 Canadian provinces. Through EPR for packaging, producers and brand owners would be obligated through the legislation, through the statutes that would be established, to assume responsibility for the cost of collecting and sorting the recyclables at the end of life. Options would also include funding for litter cleanup and consumer education to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Brand owners would then internalize these costs by incorporating them into the price of the new packaging, the new product, creating incentives to better design packaging, which should also include eliminating toxic chemicals. EPR is a strategy to add all of the environmental costs associated with a product throughout the product life cycle to the market price of that product. US states have already passed EPR laws for multiple product categories: pharmaceuticals, solar panels, carpet, mattresses, electronics, batteries, many more. In January 2018, China banned the import of most plastics and other materials headed for Chinese recycling processors, which have handled nearly half of the world's recyclable waste for the last 25 years. The US used to ship about 7 million tons of plastic trash to China each year, historically exporting about a third of our recyclables annually. So this move, China's move, led to a major global shift in where materials are recycled. And now globally, more plastics are ending up in landfills, incinerators, and found as litter. Countries, including the US, are now flooding Southeast Asian recycling markets with exported recycling bales, countries that are not prepared for the volume that they're now receiving. Many experts, and we agree, say that this is an opportunity to develop better solutions. And we believe EPR for packaging is a solution that can help. What these programs can do is stop the need to export our packaging waste to other countries. It can reduce incineration and landfilling rates. We hope they'll alleviate environmental injustice to fence line and impacted communities. We'd like them to stop excess costs to taxpayers and stop wasting valuable recycling stock. With the implementation of EPR for packaging programs in the US, we can begin the move from a linear economy where manufacturers use raw materials, make packaging, and then dispose of the packaging, to a regenerative or circular economy, where we first encourage consumers to reuse packaging, reduce use in manufacturing or purchasing, all before manufacturers make more packaging. And then consumers reuse and/or the manufacturers ensure it gets recycled. So it's just looking at doing it a different way. A true transition to a circular economy will require changes to the design of packaging. It is much harder to substitute safer chemicals once a product has already been designed. Environmental health considerations, including avoiding chemicals of concern, should be incorporated into the design of products for a circular economy. So with multiple states taking action together, especially regionally, EPR programs for packaging can be better harmonized for easier implementation by industry, as they create these new programs to manage the packaging materials that they put into the marketplace. with improved systems and future EPR programs like the ones you'll hear about today from bill sponsors. Cost internalization by the packaging industry with eco-modulated fees can reward packaging manufacturers for producing less packaging by volume, encourage them to produce more reusable or recyclable packaging, and require them to reduce or completely eliminate toxic chemicals in the packaging or packaging manufacturer. So that's a little background on the benefits of EPR for packaging. Thank you for your time. And now let's hear from state legislators on their work together in this policy area.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And to start us off with the legislators, I'd like to turn it over to California State Senator Henry Stern to give us a little bit of an overview of this group.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Melissa. As a board member of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, it's an honor to be here with so many leaders from around the country. I see some familiar faces and some new ones. I have the honor of kicking off a panel that includes 8 states, maybe, and as we know, maybe 20 to 30 states will actually be acting in this space this year. I wanted to just make a simple high-level point about the importance of state leadership this year. And what you're going to see, I think, beyond EPR is a broader movement of interstate coalitions that aren't simply waiting on Congress to act, and know that the president obviously has important work, and this new administration has important work to do in this space. In this plastics and EPR arena, for instance, rejoining the Basel Convention that we never signed on to, and infrastructure funding, and there's a lot of other work to do. But I truly see state legislatures as the tip of the spear here in preventing environmental injustices from befalling our communities, our waterways, and trying to then outsource this to other countries and further exacerbating international environmental injustice. This network that NCEL has built and really fueled with your brain trust, not as a lobbying agent, but really just as a network of ideas and a bank of expertise, truly proving to be invaluable right out the gates here. So I know we've got a lot of deep subject matter experts and significant leaders in their own right. But when you look at this issue, a piece of plastic, a poorly thought out, manufactured single-use item that maybe flows into California can easily end up in the waterways of Colorado. Maryland's problem is also New Hampshire's problem. Washington State is not separate from Oregon. Pollution doesn't know state boundaries. So I think the alliance you're seeing here today and this sort of bottoms-up approach to path-breaking environmental policy, to me, is a new model that we saw sort of happen organically and maybe by happenstance under this last administration, just out of necessity. But now it's starting to professionalize. And now we're starting to tighten up. And NCEL really is that interconnective tissue to make this more than just a series of independent efforts, but something where we can all live together. Because we're going to end up talking about a lot of the same central large corporate industries producing this material that we're saying, no, you can't go death by 1,000 pieces of plastic here. We've got to find a better way to protect public health in our communities. And there's no better time than right now. People say, why are you attacking this issue during COVID? Why can't it wait? But the fact is that there's more single-use plastic going out into our communities than ever. And so now is the time to assign the responsibility where it lies, which is not on taxpayers and not on low-income communities of color. And it's not on people who have to drink this water. It should be on the people making it in the first place. So with that, I'll get out of the way and make room for an incredible coalition of legislators here. And am I kicking it back to you, Jeff, or Melissa?
Yes, thanks so much, Senator Stern, very much for those remarks. And I will take it from here and start introducing our legislators to speak about each of their efforts in each of their states. And we will start with Maryland's delegate, Brooke Lehrman.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with all of you, all these great leaders from around the country doing important work. I think one of the things that we've seen in the past couple of years that have been successful is that we're starting to take action on banning some of the worst offenders, some of the worst single-use plastics, styrofoam, plastic bags, some of the straws and other items. But that's just not enough. And we can't ban our way to a cleaner and more environmentally just America. And so I'm really excited to be working with so many legislators here, because what we're talking about today is a more holistic solution. We're talking about looking at the huge range of packaging that comes into our states, into our communities, into our neighborhoods. And we're saying, you know what? We need to rethink this system altogether. We need to go to where it all starts. And we need to say to the producers, the companies that are making these products, we need you to work with us to make sure that we can make these items more recyclable, that we can cut out some of the single-use plastics that in the design, and help us to make sure that we can recycle these products so that they are able to be actually reused, whereas right now, most of them are not. I think we know how to solve the problem of plastic waste and the accompanying environmental problems that production and overuse of single plastics has created in our communities. We just have to do it, right? And this year, we've seen people of color disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, but we also know that these very same communities are also being negatively and disproportionately impacted by plastic production and plastic waste and trash and litter. And I think it's up to all of us to make sure that we continue to act urgently to address these environmental health and public health emergencies and to create cleaner neighborhoods, communities, for all of us and for all of our kids. So thank you so much for having us today. And thanks to everybody on this call for the amazing work that you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Delegate Lehrman. And then next up, we have from California, State Senator Ben Allen and Assemblymember Laura Friedman.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome from California, beautiful California. I'm just off of the 5 freeway driving my plug-in hybrid from Los Angeles to Sacramento to be up in the Capitol in session on time. Usually we'd be flying, of course, but this is more environmentally friendly and more COVID-friendly way of getting there. So I just wanted to say how proud I am to be part of this national effort, and to see my good friend Brooke and have the whole thing opened up by Henry and Jeff. This is such an honor. In California, we launched SB 54 AB 1080 a couple of years ago that basically created a circular economy approach that said to the producers who ultimately have the tools in their hands, listen, we gotta push you in a more environmental direction. The truth of the matter is everything that Brooke said was correct. The other thing that doesn't get mentioned a lot is that our consumers, our taxpayers, our ratepayers, our cities are being asked to pay more and more of the cost associated with plastic pollution. So just recently, for example, Sacramento, the city of Sacramento had to raise its rates by another $10 a month, just to be able to just to be able to afford the the cost of dealing with the fact that the bottom has fallen out on the recycling market. And what we're trying to do here is reinvigorate the recycling market and say to the producers, the people who actually have control over these products, you can keep producing products, but you got to do it in a more environmentally friendly way. You've got to help us figure out a way to make these products compostable, reusable, recyclable, truly recyclable, not recyclable in some lab at 2,000 degrees, but in the real world. Is this actually going to get captured? Is it going to get cleaned? Is it going to be turned into another product? If not, we got to come up with a different approach. So that's what we're trying to do in California. I'm so proud to be part of this national network of legislators from across the country. Together, by pushing this legislation, we are really going to start to move the envelope and start to send a signal to industry to start producing products that are actually going to be more environmentally friendly, more city friendly, more ratepayer friendly, more people friendly. And so I'm so proud to be part of this effort in the relaunch, at least in our state, of SB 54.
Thanks, Senator. Thank you very much. And Assemblymember Friedman?
Hi, so happy to be with all of you here today. Happy to have so many people working on this important issue. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I am ashamed every single day about the planet that we are giving her. I actually do think that we should be banning our way to a better planet. These manufacturers who have been putting this dangerous product, really dumping this dangerous product quite literally into our communities, have been doing so for years. They know the dangers that their product has in terms of that its constitution means that over time it degrades into microbeads that end up in our water supply and even in human blood with unknown health effects. They know that their products have been killing marine life for decades, and they've been blaming, what have they been doing? They've been blaming consumers. They don't give consumers choices. When you order something online, you don't have really a choice of what kind of material it's going to come in. When you go to the supermarket, more and more, everything that you want to purchase just to eat is wrapped in unnecessary layers of plastic and packaging that is not recyclable. And it's time that we all stood up and say enough is enough. We are legislators. We are the ones that get to tell manufacturers what they can dump into our communities. And we should be treating plastic like the dangerous chemical that it is, and severely regulating its ability to be used until the manufacturers actually show responsibility for the product that they are sending out. We are introducing a bill this year. I'm introducing a bill that's going to require e-commerce retailers, it's going to prohibit them from using plastic shipping envelopes, full stop. They won't be allowed to use plastic shipping envelopes, bubble wrap, and sealed air packaging. It'll prohibit large manufacturers and retailers and producers from using expanded polystyrene foam and the transportation of products into the state of California or within the state of California. It'll require large manufacturers and retailers to take back their packaging, to take it back of a consumer back so that they deal with it instead of the consumer city having to deal with it. It'll also address the sunsetting that we have in California of retailer take back programs for plastic films. You know, if you order a pen from Amazon, you don't know what it's going to come in. The worst part is that your next door neighbor who maybe didn't order any products at all online has to pay for the disposal of that product in their refuge bill. My daughter has to live with a polluted environment because of products that don't break down, that have no secondary use. We lived just fine as human beings on this planet for many, many years without these plastic products. And I believe in American ingenuity and our ability to come up with alternatives that are safe and sustainable. But it takes us as legislators, as you all know, to be willing to be brave and to push back and to demand better for our communities. And I'm so proud to be here today with a whole group of legislators that are willing and are doing exactly that. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Next up, we have Representative Nicole Lowen from Hawaii.
Thank you. Aloha. Good morning from Hawaii, everybody. So, you know, in Hawaii, as an island state and an ocean state, the issue of waste management is incredibly important. We have limited landfill capacity and limited land to site new landfills. And we also see firsthand the devastating impact that plastic and other waste has on our beaches and oceans when it's not properly disposed of. And in Hawaii, we don't have many options for in-state recycling. So we typically ship it out to other countries, and it's often very unclear how much of what we think we're recycling actually gets recycled and at what cost to the environment and human health, what kind of working conditions, et cetera. So it's just increasingly evident that local recycling programs are not a singular solution to this problem. And, you know, we talk a lot about the need for source reduction as well, but the reality is there's a limit on how much source reduction we can accomplish when in the state level, we only control the post-consumer side of things. You know, Hawaii has in recent years taken steps to ban and reduce single-use plastics, plastic bag bans, polystyrene bans, and limits on single-use items for food service. But we are at the point where the clear next step is to look at extended producer responsibility. So this year I'm introducing House Bill 1316, which will require that producers take responsibility for increasing percentages of their products. And our hope with this is threefold. We want to educate the public about the limits and expenses of locally run recycling programs. We want to relieve local governments and taxpayers from shouldering the burden of this problem financially. And then finally, working together with other states through this amazing network, we want to send a message to the industry that we expect them to do better. EPR legislation will create an incentive for products and product packaging to be designed in ways that are less costly to the environment. For too many years, industry has had every financial incentive to do the least amount possible because they are not being held responsible for paying for the problems created by their products. And we can't keep pushing these environmental and health costs onto local governments, while the industries that profit continue to say that individual action is the solution. So, I'm excited to be part of this effort. I think it's time for a global shift in how we think about this issue, how the industry thinks about end of life for the products they create, and by internalizing the costs of waste management, as we're proposing to do with this legislation, we will spur innovation in the industry. It will really be a win-win and a really important first step towards a truly circular economy. And I think EPR legislation, packaging waste is one step. We're starting here, but you can think about this in terms of every product that's out there, whether that's electronics, appliances, prescription drugs, like all things that are produced and sold and profited from. The cost of where they end up after their use should be factored into that. So I really am excited to be working on this issue with all the great people here. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. And now we will turn it over to Oregon State Representative Janine Solman.
Thank you so much. Thank you to NCEL for hosting this press event today and for inviting me to participate. I am Janine Solman. I represent House District 30 in the state of Oregon, which lies just west of Portland in Washington County, one of the most diverse counties in the state. I really appreciate learning all about what the other states are bringing forward in extended producer responsibility policies this year. Making producers responsible for waste is an important step toward a circular economy, as pointed out. It's to reducing waste and preventing litter. Truth in labeling is important. Here in Oregon, for the 2021 session, I have introduced House Bill 2592, which is a bill that seeks to incentivize producers to reduce their use of packaging and build products that are less hazardous, built to last, and are easy to recycle or reuse. Remember, it's reduce, reuse, then recycle. So to create that incentive, producers are responsible for all waste costs associated with their products, including waste collection, transportation and management, and litter cleanup costs. Fees charged to producers are adjusted based on how long a product is designed to last, how easy it is to recycle or reuse, and how hazardous it is. Oregonians are very motivated to be responsible partners in the stewardship of our environment and our natural beauty. In 2019, I helped champion and pass a sustainable shopping initiative that banned single-use plastic bags and had great support all across the state and bipartisan. This year, there are multiple bills being introduced in Oregon to address overuse of plastics, to work towards greater infrastructure for transportation electrification, and to work towards 100% clean energy. I know that passing extended producer responsibility policy in Oregon will help continue our path to addressing the climate crisis, the rising impact of pollution, and continuing impacts of China's waste import ban on America's recycling system. Producer responsibility is a proven approach to reducing waste and will improve our recycling system, because as long as individuals, governments, and future generations bear the costs of waste, the producers who design and make the products we buy have no incentive to change it. It is so encouraging to know that this work that is going on in other states, it's bringing forward these extended producer responsibility policies forward. I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that we are joined now by our next speaker, Vermont Senator Bray, Christopher Bray.
Good afternoon. Just want to make sure I had to jump on a different device than usual, so I don't know if people can hear me okay. Great.
Yes, you're all set, Senator. Thank you.
All right. So, well, you just heard a great presentation on, and I think probably everyone in this room is on the same page with embracing the benefits of EPR. Where we are in Vermont is that we had a bill last year that created an EPR 2 years ago, created a study group. We were moving forward with it last year. We ran into COVID and it sort of ran aground. An informal working group was motivated enough to keep going on their own. And so we will be doing an EPR bill. I chair natural resources and energy. In our case, we're doing energy first and solid waste second. So probably within about 6 weeks, we'll be taking up the EPR bill. And we've been the beneficiaries of looking at programs from other folks. So for instance, the recycled content provisions that we've seen in California and elsewhere. And so without, I'll pause and just say that rather than go through a series of targets within the bill, we're building a very similar initiatives to all of you. Part of the strength of this group, in my mind, is sharing good ideas. And plus, we know Vermont, at 626,000 people, is a pretty small fish. So we're hoping that New England as a whole is 19 million people, and New England plus New York State is 30 million. So we're looking to make the single fish into a school and maybe get to have an impact on the markets that a small state like ours can't have on its own. So one of the things we're considering, and this is maybe a challenge others are facing, unless you happen to be calling in from California, we're looking at how do we build statutory triggers that do something along the lines when 3 adjoining states pass, for instance, substantially similar legislation, that sort of triggering. It's not very satisfying to be in such a passive mode on that. So we may move a narrower bill forward first to make sure that we do have some progress, and then look for a broader EPR bill on packaging. So we're looking particularly at packaging with a focus on plastics and printed materials, as well as creating that, help build the market with post-consumer waste, and looking at a fee schedule that rewards recyclable packaging and discourages people from using difficult to use materials. So I'll stop there. This group's a savvy group, and they probably don't need to know anything more about what we're up to at the moment.
Thanks so much, Senator. And then we will turn it over to Washington State Senator Mona Das.
Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are today. It is such a pleasure and honor to be here with so many legislators that really care about this legislation and legislation to move our sustainable and circular economy forward. It's a true honor to be here amongst all of you. I am very concerned about plastic and pollution and improving our recycling system here in Washington State, as I know you are all in your own states. I just want to share a personal story about how I got involved and when this issue sort of came up for me. In 2004, I had the great pleasure of living in Ireland, and the first time I went to the grocery store and they asked me to pay 5 cents for a plastic bag, I'll never forget that moment. That was the first and the last time I paid 5 cents for a bag, and would always stuff, anytime I was going to the grocery store, would stuff plastic bags in any bag I had, or pockets. And always knew in Ireland when someone was going to the grocery store because they had an armful of plastic or bags under their arm. And I remember thinking, like, why don't we have this in the United States? And when I moved back, I became very aware of just how much waste we were creating by not banning single-use plastic bags, but others. And I really started a mantra at that time where if it was not recyclable, compostable, or reusable, it should not be produced, period. And EPR bills really exciting to me because it really speaks to my own mantra of why is the producer producing products that we, the consumer or taxpayer or constituents, have to deal with. That is not the way that it should work. And if they stop producing products, we have the technology now to produce products that are compostable, that are reusable, and that are recyclable. So why are we still getting packages and products in the mail that we literally have to throw in the garbage? As the representative from Hawaii mentioned, landfills are filling up and space is at a premium. So we really do need to work on this, and EPR bills like this and the ones you all are introducing really make my heart sing. It's really exciting. So let me tell you what's going on in Washington. NCL member Senator Rolfes, one of my colleagues, introduced 2 years ago Senate Bill 5397, and that resulted in a report that was overseen by our Department of Ecology and had 10 recommendations for addressing these issues. The number one recommendation was to do a producer responsibility program for all packaging. That was a bill that was introduced in December. We are now in a 2-year session, and so we've had excellent conversations with stakeholders, and we plan to work very diligently with the stakeholders over this summer and continue with that legislation. In the meantime, we had a hearing last week on a substitute bill that addressed 3 out of 10 recommendations that helps get us on the pathway. Banning styrofoam products, which I'm very excited about. Also requiring minimum recycled contents for plastic beverage containers, and doing an on request for utensils, straws, condiments, and I'm excited to say cup lids was something we just negotiated a couple of days ago. I feel that these are really strong components that we can pass to the governor this year, and I'm really proud of Washington State that has been a leader in sustainability, particularly on plastic pollution and recycling. I believe that we've set a high standard. I am honored, as I mentioned, to be on the call with so many legislators in so many states. I know that together we can pass the legislation that will leave a better planet for our future generations. So thank you so much, NCL, for hosting us. And I'm very excited to be part of this wonderful crew.
Thanks so much, Senator. Now we're going to hear from 2 states that are advancing comprehensive single-use plastic bans that are part of this network with an eye to looking towards EPR in the future. So we'll start with New Hampshire Senator David Waters.
Well, thank you, Jeff. State Senator David Waters from Dover, New Hampshire. And New Hampshire is also talking trash. And I really appreciate being part of NCEL because of its bipartisan work and looking at, many ways that my colleagues in other states are finding legislation that's right for their states. And for New Hampshire, what's right is what's going to be bipartisan. And we decided to take a comprehensive approach first by having our state develop a 10-year solid waste reduction plan to reduce solid waste by 45% over that period. And our landfills are filling up. About half of our trash comes from out of state, and recycling is one of the best ways to reduce that. So this plan will then look at ways in which plastics in particular and EPR programs for plastic, for fiber, and for other things as well. Another important bipartisan way of working on this in New Hampshire is through looking at PFAS in plastics, and particularly in food packaging. So I have a bill that would ban food packaging that has PFAS in it, and it would also set up a plastic council for the state to look at comprehensively at emerging issues with chemicals and plastics, their disposal, and at EPR as well. Then lastly, we have a bill that's trying to deal with ocean plastics. I've had a commission over the last year that has looked at the real danger of microfibers of plastic in the marine environment, and it's of course showing up in aquatic species and in mollusks as well. And these are big industries for us, and so this is a real problem. And one area in which the plastic is entering the oceans is through derelict fishing gear. So essentially, my bill will set up, I guess, what we would call a user extended responsibility program that would put a surcharge on the licenses of fishermen who use gear, whether it's pots or nets that are become derelict, and they would participate in coastal cleanup programs. And also, it would help us fund the Fishing to Energy program, which would receive this gear. So that's a very practical way of getting right at a particular problem by looking at the overall waste stream there of what's happening with fishing gear. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Senator. And finally, we have State Representative Alex Valdez from Colorado.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks NCEL for having this important discussion. And hello, everybody from island to coast. I think Senator Stern said it best. It's kind of a multi-state effort to create better outcomes. And while we don't have any ocean in Colorado, we need to be conscious of how we can all work together to create a solution here. So we introduced a series of bills in Colorado last year, one dealing with styrofoam takeout packaging from restaurants and another dealing with plastic bags. And so this year we're really excited because we're going to kind of present a combined bill that will ban plastic bags for use in all retail outlets and end styrofoam packaging for takeout containers. And the really great news is that we've done a lot of the work necessary. We started, actually NCEL really led to my pursuing this because I was more of a renewable energy legislator, but we followed kind of the pathway that Senator Bray was doing up in Vermont as a starting point. And it was really a hard go. People said we wouldn't get there. And this year people are saying it's going to pass. We're just trying to figure out how this is going to work. And so, you know, we've run a lot of traps to figure out a couple of things. How do we prevent some of the pitfalls that could come from legislation like this, where I drove to California and made multiple stops at different retailers to find out how this was being done, and found that there were thicker plastic bags in use that said on them, good for 125 uses, but really they were just thicker plastic bags. So we said we have to prevent that. So we really went through and built a bill that not only will reduce plastic, which is so incredibly important, but will not shift that to another issue. And so our bill will call for the sale of only 100% post-consumer content paper fiber bags at the point of sale. The money will go to not the retailer, but actually to programs that will raise awareness and help with recycling programs in the state of Colorado, where we desperately need to increase our rates of recycling. So we've tried to find a way to really use the reduction of plastic pollution to be the catalyst behind the growth of something greater, and that is EPR. So super excited to learn and just kind of follow my colleagues here and the work they're doing with EPR so that we can then follow. But our first step really is, hey, we have to reduce before we can really start to talk about the next step. But like I said, the other thing I just want to mention really quickly is that we took an equity lens to this, because that's one of the excuses that's commonly used as to why plastics bans are a bad thing, is they affect lower income communities or people of color disproportionately. And as the representative of one of the most polluted districts in the country, and I think the most polluted zip code in the country, I can assure you that it is those communities that really suffer the brunt of the consequences of pollution. And those are the people that are most excited for us to move forward on getting rid of it. So, but we did have to take that lens, because that is not just something that's going on kind of in the larger vernacular in politics in our country, but it's something we really need to be sensitive to, and we don't want that used as an excuse to not make progress for the people who are suffering under pollution. So again, I appreciate it. I love this group of legislators, and NCEL has been so helpful as I learned about the issue and went down this path. So thank you for the time today, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Representative. And as an organizer of this network, it's just, I think what people are seeing here is just the incredible wealth of knowledge that exists among state legislators. And it's just very fulfilling and exciting to watch you all learn from each other and guide each other. So it's a great place to be. Now, we'd like to turn it over to questions from our reporters. So when you do ask a question, we'd like to make sure you are asking to whom you are asking the question, if there is one particular person, and also please do mention your media outlet. So open to hand raising, or if anyone just wants to go ahead and start.
I have a question. I'm with Oregon Public Broadcasting. My question would be for Janine Solman, Representative. I wanted to ask you pretty bluntly why you think your bill is better than the bill that the governor is proposing for a similar concept.
Thank you so much for that question. I would say that The bill that I am bringing forward is a bill that puts more responsibility on the producer, and I think that's what in my opening remarks, I feel like that is a key component to getting this plastic reduction and plastic waste to come to be. And the recycling steering committee that has been meeting for 2 years in Oregon has it's more of a shared responsibility bill. And so there's where the main difference comes to be. And I just wanted to, I'm working with advocates, working with other legislators on having the producers have more responsibility in the bill that I'm working on.
Thank you.
Thanks much. Other questions? I see Jacob Wallace. Do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Thanks. My name is Jacob Wallace. I'm with E&D News. My question was directed to the legislators from California. I had seen that the Consumer Brands Association had criticized SB 54 for being not scalable. And I was wondering if you could respond to that criticism and also talk about whether you're concerned about how having different policies in different states could present an additional burden to the industry.
Senator,
go ahead. Yeah, hi there. You know, it's interesting. I mean, the consumer brands have now entered into conversations with us about trying to create a mechanism to raise funds for the infrastructure. But at the end of the day, when they say that, they're basically, their argument was about infrastructure, at least as best I can understand. I mean, they threw out a lot of buzzwords in the course of trying to kill the bill at the end of session last year. At the end of the day, this is essentially about telling those producers who produce these products that they need to move in a more sustainable direction. The products are already there. We already know in nearly every one of the product categories that we're talking about that there is a more sustainable alternative that's already on the market, even if it may be going to a smaller portion of the consumer base. So for them to say it's not scalable, it doesn't jive with the basic facts on the ground. Obviously it'll take a shift in factory style and all the rest. But we had a gentleman come in to meet with us who had met recently with Dart that makes all of the styrofoam, for example, who showed that there's an organic alternative made up of shrimp shells and cornstarch and vinegar that can basically make foam that recreates all of the properties necessary associated with styrofoam to protect your appliances when you're trying to put them in a box and move them from Best Buy to your house, but do so in a way that's purely biodegradable and that can immediately be used in an existing styrofoam factory without major overhaul of the factory itself, without having to change the workforce, without having to change the equipment that much at minimal cost. So the fact is that there are wonderful alternative products out there all over the place. They're being used and they're actually on market. Our bill, SB 54, would basically only shift products toward products that actually exist already on the market. And what they just need is a little bit of a push. This is an argument that we heard years ago when the automobile industry complained about the clean air standards that were imposed in the 70s on cars. When basically kids were growing up in Los Angeles with half of the lung capacity of kids in other parts of the country because of how bad the smog and the air pollution was. And the automobile industry said that we can't do this, there's no way, but they knew that there was actually technology out there that would allow them to do this. And the car companies basically got with the program once the rules were passed. And now we have much cleaner air in Los Angeles, even though we've got, twice or three times as number of people on the road. So, I mean, this is absolutely scalable. We know that it is, but this is just typical foot dragging by folks who just don't want to change. The interesting thing is one of the reasons why we got as many industry groups to come off of opposition of our bill as we did is because there's a lot of businesses and industry groups that are actually further along in the R&D, and we're actually producing this stuff and selling this stuff. They know that they have a competitive advantage associated with the passage of this bill. And so it is absolutely scalable. We can get you in touch with all the businesses and companies right now that are producing this more sustainable packaging that would benefit under the passage of SB 54.
Great, and this is Melissa Netto. I just also want to add, as far as the scalability, that one of the main reasons for having this network of legislators through NCEL is that we are hoping to have similar elements, similar programmatic language in the bill so that it is easier for industry to go forward when that first producer responsibility organization is set up. Whatever state is the first to pass an EPR for packaging bill in the country, all will be looking toward how that is set up, how the state environment department creates the rules for that. So we are hoping to assist industry, the future industry that will be creating and working within these EPR for packaging programs, to have similar elements so that it can be easier to implement on their end as well.
Thank you both. And
Well, I just want to say that we are talking to consumer brands and committed to working with them, and we might very well come up with a decent compromise that will meet our mutual goals. So stay tuned.
thank you. And I see a hand raised from Deborah Kahn.
Yeah, hi, can you guys, okay, you can hear me. Two questions. Assemblymember Friedman, when are you introducing your plastic packaging bill? And then a larger question that also has to do with industry opposition. Just what's the purpose of the call as it relates to that? They've been pretty successful in killing bills in previous sessions, as you just noted. So is the goal of this to present a unified front here, or put them on notice, or what's the goal?
Well, the goal is to reduce plastic packaging. That is truly the goal. And of course, there's always a discussion. There's always give and take when you do a bill. And I do think that there is something about the simplicity of this bill that will resonate with the public. Sometimes these measures are extremely complicated because we spend a lot of time working with industry and trying to satisfy them, and we end up with something that feels like it is kind of a huge, difficult to understand document. But at the end of the day, what we want is for people to be mailing their products in something that we can recycle. And right now that we know what that is, and it's not plastic and it's not polystyrene. So I do think that, I think that we are right. I think that it is not right for these products to be dumped into our communities with no thought given as to how they can be disposed of, when we know that there's no way of disposing of them safely or without damaging our environment. Whether you throw them in a landfill, or they end up in the ocean, or they break down into teeny beads over time that ends up in our soil and our food and our water, they are not safe. And I don't know why my daughter has to suffer because an industry doesn't want to use a different material that we know is out there. I mean, Amazon has been changing their packaging, and they are starting to roll out paper-based packaging materials that are recyclable, or at least even if they're not, they don't do harm to the environment because they're made out of paper. And they do a fine job at protecting what's inside. So that's what should be used. I don't understand why we are so concerned about it being difficult for manufacturers when we know that they can do it, and we know what the results of doing nothing are, which is an ocean that has more plastic in it than fish very soon, where marine life all across from every level is literally dying because of what ends up in the ocean. We know that there is plastic in people's bloods. There's plastic in babies' bloods. How is that okay? How are we okay with saying that we're going to give the industry more time, or that we're going to put their bottom line above the health of our children? When did that become even part of this conversation? Industries had a long time to change, and many of them, to their credit, are changing. But my responsibility is to protect the health of my community. And we have failed miserably at that over time, for the past decades. And our whole planet is bearing the impact of that. So I would be neglecting my duty if I didn't put my constituents' health first, if I didn't put their pocketbooks first, because they are paying through the nose to deal with these non-recyclable materials. We've given them this fiction that if they put all these products in the blue bin, it's all okay and it all gets recycled. And that's a lie. Well, we need to stop the lie and we need to act. And so I wonder why the press isn't out there holding, asking the manufacturers, how did you expect the cities to deal with all this film? What are they supposed to do with it? Why aren't you taking it all back if you think it's so easy to recycle? Why don't you just take it back then? Those are the questions we should be asking. So how is it going to do? I don't know how it's going to do, but I'm trying to get manufacturers and shippers to do the right thing here, and hopefully some of them will agree and say, we can do this. We have the technology. We put a man on the moon, and we send satellites to Mars, and we can send a widget a couple hundred miles safely without using a material that's used once, and then future generations are going to have to deal with the effect of that one-time use.
Deborah, just to add to what Laura was saying, I think folks from industry, at least the ones who opposed us, know that they're on borrowed time. Our aggressive legislation passed our state Senate. It came within just 4 votes of passing the assembly, and the circumstances of the call not having been lifted on the last day. The governor was going to sign it. So, and by the way, we've got a ballot measure that's qualified for the next ballot that's more aggressive than our bill that pulls through the roof. And now we've got these wonderful partners on this call and in New York from across the country who are working hand in glove with us on similar legislation across the country. So we're upping the pressure. And as Laura mentions, I mean, the public is increasingly becoming aware of and sensitive to the need for action in this area. And so we're not gonna stop here. And we came so close the last go around. I'm feeling increasingly confident that we're going to make some major change over the next couple of years, especially with our new partners in Washington and similar legislation also having been introduced in Congress.
Thank you, Senator. Just to put a finer point, those were really great points.
Senator Bray, sorry to interrupt you, Jeff. I think Senator Bray might have had an insight there too.
Well, thanks. I can go after Jeff if you
no,
want to continue. Well, I was just going to say, the business as usual case, which is literally poisoning us every day, is we keep getting roadblocks thrown in our way. Well, what unintended consequences will this have? What costs will it have? 2 years ago, when we did the comprehensive plastic single-use ban, we did a very long rollout. So for someone who's going through this struggle now, it was 18 months from passing the bill to implementation. And there was a very a great effort by our Department of Environmental Conservation to reach out to the public and let them know this was coming, working with merchants to get ready, spend down provisions for any kind of pre-existing inventory, et cetera. And and lo and behold, it turns out the date that it finally became effective was July 1 of this year. So middle of the pandemic, there was a whole group of people said, well, this is too much to do during a pandemic. You have to pause it. It also turned out a bill from 10 years ago, the final step for getting all our organic waste into recycling programs, composting programs, that date was also July 1 of this year. So it's right down to the residential level. Both things, because we had gone on a slow but steady progress towards them and engaged the public along the way, went off without a hiccup, so it's really easy for industry to always try to hamstring us by saying, how are you going to ruin things for the rest of us? Meanwhile, citizens, as Assemblyperson Friedman was saying, they're being poisoned every day. So I think we need to turn the story on its head and then realize that the doubters will always tell us it's a little too hard to do. But if you engage the public and give them time to get ready, to me, I've been impressed with how smoothly it's happened. And how many people will just say to me, they're actually, you wouldn't think you'd hear it, proud to live in a place that no longer does this with bags, that recycles its organics. So I think we're maybe underestimating the public's appetite for real progress.
But Senator Bray, to your point, and Jeff, I'll turn it back to you. The public may be there. We see state legislators pushing, but the centralized lobbying power, Deborah, I would encourage you to go do your own investigation on this, but looking at the budgets for the American Chemistry Council or some of these consumer packaging associations, they isolate and then they stop these efforts. So Representative Lowen is going to be isolated. They put her on an island and then go after that bill on its own. And Representative Valdez is pushing, and they'll lobby it just within that state legislature, and you feel alone. And so you're right. Today is about the fact that, one effort in Washington is not alone. And, Delegate Lehrman in Maryland is not alone. So they're going to have to reckon with a whole host of measures going out. And, it's a bottom-up effort, but we're going against a very centralized, coordinated lobbying effort here with a lot of dollars. So this is the best way we know to respond.
Thank you, Senator. And then just to finish my thought, I was just going to say that this is one last point about why this call is happening, is to show that EPR's time has come. This is a mainstream idea. This is across the country. And when this many states work on an issue, it also puts Washington, D.C. on notice that it should be thinking of it as well. And I see one more question now from Kendra Pierre-Louis.
Yes, Pierre-Louis, thank you. This is a kind of a more practical question, which is, to what degree are you going to need to vet the alternatives? So I'm bringing up the issue that came up, I think about a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, where it was discovered that a lot of the compostable containers that Whole Foods and Sweet Green was using in lieu of plastic contained PFAS. And so how does that factor into sort of what we're moving away from?
Was that directed at go ahead.
Everyone.
I was just going to share that there is model legislation going on right now that would add PFAS to all packaging, and it's something that if it was removed from packaging at the state level, then they would have to follow that with an EPR law as well. But it is a huge issue that many different segments of the policy world are working on right now, with no easy answer.
I would just say, in terms of, that in the end of the day, if what we're asking for in our bills is true compostability, having PFAS, having PFAS levels in the items, in the products, that would render these products not truly compostable, because they wouldn't help produce soil that could actually be used, because they'd be toxic, would render them ineligible for meeting the goals of our legislation. So we put in language that dealt with that very issue into our California bill, and I'm happy to share it with both the journalists and also with my colleagues from the other states.
And I would just add one more thing about PFAS and other toxic chemicals. There can be specific language in, in any of these bills or added in potentially from the State Environment Department that bans specific chemicals and demands safer alternatives, whether it's in the actual packaging itself or in the manufacturing process, because obviously people are exposed there as well. So that can be added.
Thank you. Senator Bray?
I was just going to say, we're working on a bill to ban PFAS in packaging because of the food packaging, particularly because of the exposure, like food wraps and stuff like that for takeout. And but again, back to the underlying EPR story. Once we have forever chemicals move into our state, they are a forever problem. Even when So I think probably every state is dealing with this one. You end up collecting the waste, you handle it responsibly, you take it to a landfill, which is kind of like a giant espresso machine, and out comes garbage juice, and they take the leachate away, and then what do they do with that PFAS, that leachate that contains PFAS, heavy metals, etc. Here in Vermont, they, the standard answer is take it to a wastewater treatment facility, where we go back to dilution of the leachate. So we're sending it back out into the environment. And in some cases, that travels to lakes that supply the drinking water for about a third of Vermonters. So again, it's like, we know we have to go upstream, because once it's in our environment, it's almost, it's very difficult to manage. We're now coming up, it's almost a joke when you hear someone say, well, we're going to treat the leachate from the landfill, and the treatment process is going to collect it, and then the recaptured PFAS is going to be put in the landfill. So some of these solutions don't make any real sense. I'll just say, it reminds me of the Cat in the Hat when I was reading that book, 50 years ago. So.
All right.
I think just quickly, it goes back to the bigger question of EPR. I mean, it's not going to all happen tomorrow, but if we make producers responsible for the environmental costs, then, there's going to be a limit on how much they will try to get away with, because there could be, it's not like producers are unaware of the existence of these toxic chemicals. So, if they're looking at potentially facing legislation in the future, or, whatever the case may be, I just think the idea that they are not accountable is what needs to change, and the perception of who is accountable is what needs to change.
Thanks so much. Oh, Assembly member? Oh, no. Okay. Well, we are past time, so I don't see any more hands raised, so that would be a good time to end us. But first, I just want to ask every reporter, if you did not RSVP, please do send us your information. You can send it to info@ncel.net, and that way we can make sure we're sending all the supportive materials to you here as well. I want to thank you all for attending. Thank you all these legislators who are doing this amazing work in the states, and for taking the time to be on today.